Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Curseof and welcome back to another video. Today we are here for a brand new deck profile for the Battle City Box format. Today we have my top 8 Spellproof Armor deck profile. I am very proud of this deck, as I actually got top 8 not just in any tournament, but in the biggest speed duel tournament held so far. It was a 106 player event. It was hosted on the Speed Duel League Discord, which will be linked down in the description below for you guys to head over and check out. They do a lot of fantastic events over there. I highly recommend checking it out. But regardless, I managed to take a top 8 slot with this deck profile here. Spellproof Armor has been a deck that I have messed around with a lot throughout many formats, but I finally think it has a chance to shine in this one. Anyway, without further ado, let's go ahead and hop into the deck. So, to start things off, there's honestly nowhere better to start than the skill itself, Spellproof Armor. So for those of you who are unaware what this skill does, it basically says all of your machine monsters are unaffected by spell effects. That means Book of Moon won't work on them, Offerings of the Doom won't work on them, Creature Swap won't work on them, and it is just a super relevant protection to have. Along with that, all of your machine normal monsters require one less tribute, so you have the option to normal summon them for free, which can be very relevant when we get big beat sticks added to the game like Ally of Justice Colossus. So, very powerful skill card here. A lot of people overlook it because it doesn't give you a immediate plus like a lot of the skills that people are using, like Union Combination, Magnetic Attraction, Inner Conflict, and cards like that. But Spellproof Armor is a very powerful skill. Spell immunity is amazing and gives you a sort of pseudo plus in a way where your opponent can't use those spells that they use against your opponent's monsters. You guys know how these deck profiles work. We put the skill up in the top left hand corner and we move straight into the monsters. Starting off here, we have the boss monster of the deck. We have 3 copies of Yugioh. Yugioh is overall just the best monster to use in this deck. It is a 2400 body. It is a machine, so it's immune to spells, and it also shuts down all traps, which basically gives you a 2400 beat stick that cannot be stopped by anything except for monster effects or a bigger body, which is super relevant. Some of you guys might be thinking, what about Blowback Dragon? Blowback Dragon was obviously another single tribute machine monster with a pretty decent effect that was added in the Battle City box. And although the removal effect of the Blowback Dragon can be very relevant, it is all reliant on a coin toss. And you do not want to be going into a competitive event relying on coin tosses to use your effects. So overall, just being able to shut down traps with Yugioh is way more relevant and is definitely the way to go. I mentioned this card before, and it is the 3 copies of Ally of Justice Colossus. Believe it or not, Yugioh is not actually your deck's main strategy. Yes, if you can drop a Yugioh on the field, that is fantastic, but what your deck is really just here to do is just beat down your opponent. If you can shut down traps, it's just going to assure your beatdown that much more, but your overall strategy is just to attack with big monster. And that's why we have 3 copies of Ally of Justice Colossus. It is a 2300 beat stick that you can just normal summon because of your Spellproof Armor skill. It is immune to spells, so the only way they are stopping is with trap effects or with monster effects, and if you have Yugioh on the field, trap effects are not relevant. And it's just the biggest normal summonable monster in the game, alongside Gaia if you're using the Knight of Legend skill, but this is just honestly so much better. It's immune to all your opponent's spell effects. It works fantastic in the Spellproof Armor deck, and if you're playing Spellproof Armor, this card is a 3-up. If you're playing any less than 3 Ally of Justice Colossus, you are playing the deck 100% wrong. This card is the mascot of this deck now until we get Cybertech Alligator, probably. And yeah, fantastic card. Gotta run it. So glad we got this in the Battle City box. Continuing the big monster beatdown strategy, we move into our last monster of the deck here, that being one copy of Machina Gear Frame. Before I actually entered the event, I was testing out a Machina engine in this deck, playing Gear Frame plus Peacekeeper, but overall Peacekeeper isn't worth it because this deck is a beatdown strategy. The goal is to attack with big monster and overwhelm your opponent. You just want big beat sticks that can attack, so running an engine is not worth it. Alongside that, Gear Frame itself just isn't worth it at multiples. It is an 1800 beat stick, which is actually less than something like Charging Gaia or a breaker that hasn't used its pop effect. And why run it when you can just why run more copies of Gear Frame when you can just run more copies of Colossus, which I'll get into when I get into the spells. Overall, it's just a one-of because it's good to have more monsters at your disposal, and its protection effect when it's equipped can come up every now and again, but it's just a one-of. It's just a cute little tech. It's not necessary. You just need more beat sticks, so it does come up. That is technically it for the monsters of the deck, but moving off into the spell cards here, the very first spell I'm going to show off to you guys is 3 copies of Summoner's Art, which is basically 3 more copies of Ally of Justice Colossus, which means technically alongside your Gear Frame, you are running 7 normal summonable monsters to max out on your beatdown strategy as much as you can. Summoner's Art is super relevant. You need to get access to your Colossus. It is the mascot of your deck because it is the main monster you're going to be summoning. You want to see it as soon as possible, so we run 6 copies of it. If you're not running 6 copies, at least run 5. Please, but I really think 6 is the way to go. Honestly, I think this deck is the way to go for the spell-proof armor strategy. Summoner's Art is way too essential, and Colossus is way too essential to not max out on running it. So, yeah, we got 3 copies of Summoner's Art. Next up, we have the best staple card of this format. We have 3 copies of Book of Moon. Book of Moon is fantastic for going up against your opponent if they have, you know, big beat sticks of their own, like maybe they summon their own Jinzo. Well, being able to book that is super relevant. Being able to get their monster set so you can potentially swing over it is super important because this deck does struggle against bigger monsters. That is its main weak point, so Book of Moon is super essential for that specific thing. Along with that, Book of Moon has some other applications, like potentially stopping a conflict OTK. It actually can be relevant to stop maybe a Offerings to the Doomed. I know you're saying, but they don't affect your machine monsters. Yes, that's true, but we might run something in here that can be relevant with that. And overall, Book of Moon is just super important as a card. It's super important of a card as a whole. Just being able to set your opponent's monsters and shut down continuous effects and just stop OTKs and stop attacks. Super great. And honestly, what I think Book of Moon is most relevant for is guaranteeing that Soul Exchange is going to resolve. For those of you who do not know, this is actually an interaction that does occur. If you activate Soul Exchange and then on resolution of your Soul Exchange, your opponent books their monster, Soul Exchange is no longer in effect. This is because Soul Exchange is a lingering effect, similarly to an attack boost, and if you set the monster forgets all lingering effects, so Soul Exchange is no longer in effect, I guess you would say. So, what I like to do is, if my opponent summons a big monster, especially off of a conflict play, and they attack into me, yes, life points are a resource, but I will book their monster right then and there, and then on the following turn, if I have the Soul Exchange plus Tribute combo, I will go ahead and use that combo to guarantee that I can tribute off their monster, because if I booked it the turn before, they can't book it on resolution of Soul Exchange and stop my Soul Exchange from resolving. Because of that specific play, I never not had Soul Exchange resolve throughout the entirety of the tournament, and it was super relevant. Soul Exchange is a fantastic card. Some people might want to play it at 3. I think it's only a 2 of, for the sole fact then it can get cloggy at more than 2. It is a dead card if you don't have a tribute monster or if you don't need to tribute over something. So it can be dead a lot of the time, which is why I opted for 2 over 3. And along with that, we have more ways to get out Jinzo than just Soul Exchange. Yes, it's a great card. I think it's only a 2 of. I will say, though, something that's super relevant to mention is that summoning Ally of Justice Colossus without a tribute is an optional effect off of Spellproof, meaning you can still opt to sack a monster for the summon, so it can work in conjunction with Soul Exchange. And going off into the last spell card of the deck, we have one copy of Shrink. Shrink is very relevant in the fact that, like I mentioned before, the deck struggles versus big monsters. Machina Gearframe is 18, Colossus is 23, Jinzo is 24. What do you do if your opponent summons an XYZ Dragon Cannon? How do you kill it? Well, if they attack in, and they didn't have the discard fodder to potentially pop a Shrink, and they go ahead and attack in, and you flip up that surprise Shrink. Not many people are on Shrink right now, and because of that fact, it's honestly a huge surprise factor. Actually, it was a last-minute add to the deck on my part, and it was probably one of the best adds that I made at the in the deck as a whole. The surprise Shrink came up so often, it outed big monsters that I otherwise would have had a huge issue dealing with frequently, and I was able to win a good few games off of this Shrink. So, yeah, it doesn't seem like it's worth much, but it is extremely relevant, and I really like it as a 1-of. You might argue you want to cut it down, but because this deck's main issue is big monsters, I think Shrink is 100% a necessary card. Going off into the trap cards of the deck, I did say this was a beatdown strategy, so we have to play the trap monster himself, Zoma the Spirit. Some of you might think Swampmere is better. I disagree with you wholeheartedly. I think Zoma's better because it has its phenomenal burn effect. Yes, having your Swampmere protected under Spellproof Armor is fantastic, but having the ability to burn your opponent off of a Zoma, I think, is more fantastic. I did have a few games where Zoma's burn effect came in clutch, and if I had Swampmere in those games, well, you know, that would have sucked. There was actually only one time that the fact it was Zoma over Swampmere was a bad thing, and that was when my opponent did book it. But they're going to remove most of their Book of Moon or Shrink or offerings going into Game 2 and Game 3, where if you didn't reveal Zoma in Game 1, it is a surprise card, and they're not prepared for it anymore, meaning I think Zoma is overall just the better option. And the burn effect is too important to pass up, especially when you struggle versus big monsters. If you can already get in a Colossus attack or a Gearframe attack or even a Zoma direct attack somewhere in there, and you can follow up with a Zoma, swing into your opponent's big monster, you can just win the game, and that is too good to pass up. Zoma is still a staple, even with Breaker in the meta, and it is a 2-of in my opinion. Along with that, like I said, beatdown deck, it's another 1800 body to help that beatdown strategy. Next up, we have one copy of Eliminating the League. This was once a Offerings to the Doomed, but overall, I found Offerings to actually end up being worse than Eliminating the League. I'm going to explain why. For starters, Offerings makes you skip your next draw phase, which means it's technically overall a -1 over the course of 2 turns. Although Eliminating the League is a -1 initially, instead of not drawing, you get to decide what to discard. Maybe you have a Dead Summoner's Art that you can discard, or the Shrink isn't doing much right now, let's discard that. Or maybe even a Soul Exchange, you can discard that. You have lots of spell cards that are options to discard, and because you get to choose what you pitch, choose what you go neg off of, it's a lot more relevant. Along with that, Eliminating the League can be a neutral card if you are able to hit a, monster your opponent has in field and they have the exact same monster in hand. That didn't come up in the tournament, but if it does, it is super, super relevant. And along with that, Book of Moon on an Offerings hurts a lot more than a Book of Moon in response to Eliminating the League, because going back to that fact that I mentioned before, choosing what you pitch is a lot better than not getting a draw, especially when you can't guarantee that Offerings is always going to resolve anymore. So I think eliminating the league is the way to go. Along with that, hand knowledge is phenomenal. Being able to look at your opponent's hand is just so fantastic. So eliminating the league, I love as a one-of in the deck. Along with that, you want answers to big monsters. I've been through this so many times now, but it is a big monster answer. And for the final card in the deck, we have Psychic Shockwave here. And I'm actually going to quickly jump back to Zoma, because I mentioned to you guys before that Soul Exchange was not our only way to get Jinzo out on the field easily. Summoning a Zoma and stacking it off for a Jinzo is another way, and Psychic Shockwave is another way here. Psychic Shockwave actually only came up in the top 16 match that I had. It was the only time I was able to actually resolve the card, but when I did resolve it, and I was able to turbo out a Jinzo on the board, it was fantastic. When this card resolves, it is amazing. It is essential to run as a one-of in the Spellproof Armor deck. If you're not running Psychic Shockwave, I honestly don't think you're playing the deck right. Turboing out a Jinzo is way too important. And what makes the Psychic Shockwave and eliminating the league actually pretty good is that you're going to run into a lot of scenarios where you have dead Summoners Art. Because you're going to draw into your Colossus, already have all of them gone out of your deck, then you're going to draw into a Summoner's Art, and it's just going to be a dead card. And if you can just pitch those to get powerful effects off, like Psychic Shockwave or eliminating the league, it is just too good to pass up. Psychic Shockwave is a fantastic card. Turboing a Jinzo on the field is a fantastic thing to do. And with Zoma still being super prevalent, Widespread Ruin existing, and Dust Tornado still being a very good card, I don't think you should pass up on a card like Psychic Shockwave. Along with that, traps are still relevant. There is burn/stall decks still doing things, so Jinzo is very good to get on the board here. But that is going to go ahead and conclude our main deck here. That is a 20-card main deck, and honestly, I love every single option in that main deck. There's not a single thing that I would change off the top of my head, and honestly, I feel like this is 100% the best way to build the Spellproof Armor deck. But going off to the side deck here, first off, we have one copy of Ally of Justice Core Destroyer. The majority of the side deck is made to deal with the XYZ matchup, as it is a very difficult matchup considering that they have huge monsters. That's one big issue. And then they have monster effects, which is another big issue. They put so many issues on board that you need ways to deal with it. And Ally of Justice Core Destroyer is able to out all of their big monsters, which is super good. Along with that, we have two copies of Cosmic Cyclone. This not only deals with the field spell, stop them from plussing and stop that from resolving, it also deals with your opponent having a Y equipped with Z. If they swing that into your monster, maybe your Machina Gearframe for example, you can flip up Cosmic, banish their Z, and they'll just crash and lose their Y. Why Cosmic is better than Dust for this specific matchup is not only does it work in conjunction with, you having a Jinzo on the field, but more importantly, it banishes their monster, meaning they don't have it in grave as a option to use with Union combination. So I really like Cosmic for that matchup, and it is in here as a 2-of. The last two cards we have here for the XYZ matchup is two copies of Lost Wind. I'm pretty sure most of you guys know what this does. It is pretty self-explanatory, but basically, your opponent special summons a monster, you can flip up Lost Wind and negate its effects and half its attack. So, yeah, if they special summon a monster from the extra deck, you can reset your Lost Wind, so you can recycle it. Super relevant, super great, good card, gotta run it. And the final card for the side deck here is actually not for the XYZ matchup, but for the Spellproof Armor Mirror, and that is Solitary Sword of Poison. What this card does here is, well, one, it deals with big monsters, which is relevant, but more importantly, the mirror is basically decided by who gets a Jinzo on field first. If you get a Jinzo on field first, then you win. If your opponent gets a Jinzo on field first, then they win. So, we need ways to deal with a Jinzo on board. And what card does better than deal with a Jinzo than a card that buffs your monster to be bigger than Jinzo? That's why we have Solitary Sword of Poison in here. Buff your monster, get over your opponent's Jinzo. That's also why having so many ways to turbo out Yugioh, like Psychic Shockwave, Zone of the Spirit, and Soul Exchange are so relevant in this deck. But overall, it's here for the mirror. Getting Yugioh on field first is how you win the mirror, so I think it's pretty necessary to run a equip card in the side deck here. And then finally we have our standard extra deck, which hasn't changed at all. Just, you know, 6 of these fusion monsters. They're all chillin', they're pretty cute. Just want to have an extra deck so your opponent never knows what you're playing. Maybe they'll think you're playing XYZ before you reveal that skill. Who knows? But that will go ahead and conclude my top 8 Spellproof Armor deck profile for the December 2020 format, the Battle City box format. If you guys enjoyed this video, please hit the like button down below and also consider subscribing. I'm going to be doing videos every second day on Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duels. Maybe I'll throw in something a little bit different every now and again, but this is a primary Yu-Gi-Oh! Speed Duel channel, so if you're not already subscribed and you enjoy that kind of stuff, I highly recommend doing so. Anyway, I'll catch you guys all, not tomorrow, but the following day for another video. That's a wrap, guys.